Welcome in. Tonight we'll be going over chapters 11 and 12 in our book, Our Thoughts Determine Our Lives. We coupled these chapters together because they're relatively short. I think one of them, the first one was about 5 or 6 pages, and the second one was 7 or 8 pages, depending on, actually I have the digital copy, so for those of you with physical copies, that probably means nothing. In my digital copy, it was 5 and 7. But anyways, I'd like to start this week, as we've done before, and open it up to everyone first. Anything that was interesting to you, and we can discuss those things. And then I only have a couple of little points, and so I'm thinking that some of you may bring up the sections that I was going to speak about anyways. We only have about 45 minutes anyway, now that we started a little bit late. So why don't we go ahead and get started? If you have an interesting point from either chapter, please bring it up to us. If you could say the number, well, first of all, the chapter it's from and the number paragraph that it is. For those of us who are using the digital copies, it's easier to find rather than the page number. So please, if you have something to bring forward, please do it now.
I really liked chapter 12, number 4. That's really, I just focused on that because it's such a challenge. Must strive to have peace in our homes, and peace starts with each one of us. And when we have peace, it spreads. And it's just hard when you're stressed and raising kids like some of you are now. And my kids are scattered all over the country. And my mother, I worry. So peace is, and there's only one way to have that peace is through Jesus. So I really like that section.
Yeah. And, for all of us who are reading this book, it's not a surprising thing that he's saying here, right? I mean, we've heard this probably like in every chapter since the beginning, that this peace comes from us and maintain, the last couple chapters have been, it's so important to maintain our inner peace and to maintain that peace that we have from God. But also, in the early chapters, he talks a lot about how he starts with our thoughts. He doesn't say peace from the beginning. He says, our thoughts really affect other people. And the thoughts that we foster are really important to that. And, he says, of course, many times throughout the book, how different would the world be if we all did this, like he's saying in number 4 there in chapter 12, if we started with ourselves and if we changed ourselves and affected other people with this peace, the world would be a very different place. And we'd have a lot more, we talk about world peace. We would have a lot more peace in the world, but we would have that peace from God that we pray for, at every service, in the petitions for the peace from above and for the salvation of our souls. And so that's a recognition, I think, that we can say in the service, in our divine services, that we can't gain peace. We can gain, it's just like that idea of love that we have in the chapter on love, that we have a form of love and there's some love there, but we don't have God's love. And it's the same thing with this peace, is we may have some form of peace, some form of earthly peace, or what we think peace is, but true peace comes from above. And that's why we pray that way in our petitions, for the peace from above. We get peace from God, and we want God's peace. That's an excellent place to start. Thank you, Lisa.
I thought something was striking in that number 2, just at the bottom of still number 4, how he says those people that have peace, they will not be offended if you insult them in any way. Whatever way you treat them, they are quiet and peaceful, and they are truly sorrowed because you are in such spiritual torment. And then, in the very last number 2 and number 14 at the end, again, he says, he's talking about that person who has peace and how people are just impressed by that everyone else is nervous and easily offended. I just thought that was interesting how he said that person who's at peace just is not just doesn't get offended or upset.
Mm-hmm. And it speaks even more to this form of like spiritual apathy, where, you know, the demons and evil and, you know, the way that people are acting try to affect us and try to change our disposition and bring us back down to that level of brokenness and our fallen nature. But like he says, you know, if you're truly in this place of peace, of God's peace, nothing can affect you.
Mm-hmm.
Even those things. And it's interesting, that last line, because you know, it tells us, and how many times have we heard about spiritual fathers that have lived on this earth that we read about, especially I think of course, St. Geonisios, because he has so many books about his spiritual counsels and things like that, that this true peace also gives us this this sort of heightened sense of things, this recognition of things, and this discernment that we talk about, and that you can feel this torment that other people are having spiritually when you're in this place of peace. You can really recognize things, and you can think of it as seeing the world kind of slowed down. You know, like the world moves at such a fast pace, the world that we live in, and everything is constant and moving and changing. And when we have this spiritual peace from God, things kind of slow down, and we recognize what people are missing when they're constantly in this motion and this speed and this, you know, this motion of time. And, you know, you think about the other thing is like living in God's time. God, you know, God is outside of time. God is not constrained by time like we are. You know, he has no beginning and no end. He doesn't change throughout time. And so, you know, these people who are kind of in this place of God's peace, are getting a taste of that, and are getting a taste of, you know, not having to worry about, you know, what we're going to do next or what happened before, or they're truly living in the present, and they're not thinking about, you know, all of us function based on our experiences that have passed and based on anticipation of what's coming next. So, you know, I'm sitting here talking to all of you, but in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, after my class, we have to do bedtime for the kids. We got to do bath, whatever before that. You know, and then I'm going to do X, Y, and Z for church, you know, while I sit on the couch and watch Netflix or whatever. So my mind is not, you know, take this lightly. My mind is here with you, and I'm, you know, discussing our subject matter, but spiritually, perhaps I'm not living in the moment like someone who has attained God's peace in that sense. Does that make sense to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
So it's something for us to strive for. And he literally says that in the first sentence of this section: you must strive to have peace in our homes. So think about it. You know, it's a daunting challenge for us, but I am here with you. I promise. Physically, I'm here with you, especially, but mentally, I'll lean on you all to keep me here. Very good. So, anything else on that section in particular, or another one? I see Catherine unmuted herself. Go ahead, Catherine.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, I really like the whole chapter on inner peace, because with this whole COVID stuff, this to hold on to if I even had it to begin with. But I really liked, among other ones, I really liked number 9. You should learn to love little things. Always try to be modest and simple in everything. When the soul is mature, God will give it peace. The Lord looks upon us and is pleased when we yearn after his peace. Until such time as the soul is mature enough to receive the Lord, he will only sometimes allow it to see and sense that he is present everywhere and fills all things. These are moments of indescribable joy. But after that, the Lord hides himself from us once again in order that we might yearn for him and seek him with all our heart. And when I was reading that, and you mentioned Elder Geonisios, in this really incredible book about the the gurus, the young man, and Elder Paisios, there's a scene at the end. Have you read that book, Father? There's
Yes.
a scene at the end where the young man asks the elder, what is it like to see you've got everything, all things? And it's just an incredibly beautiful passage as she's trying to describe the heightened state that the world actually exists in. And it made me think of that, and how when that was from him, it was just like that was all he could think about getting back to, and how amazing it must be to live in that amount of peace and confidence with the Lord. But yeah, that one I liked a lot.
Yeah, I mean, he's speaking of Saint Paisios. He's amazing. It's amazing to read some of the things and the spiritual counsels he's given to people, and like the stories about the various things. That book is excellent. I read it with a group in my last church, my first year there. So you're talking like 3 years ago now. So I haven't really read it since then, but I do remember that part of the book. And in general, I mean, you think about people like Saint Paisios, and there are other holy people, maybe not saints perhaps yet, or you think of Elder Thaddeus, as an example too. We're reading this book, and he's not a saint yet or anything, but this sort of heightens this, like I was talking about, this heightened awareness of things. And like Saint Paisios, you read some of and especially in that book, but there are other ones too. There are so many books with his spiritual counsels in them. And he had this, people describe it as clairvoyance, but like he knew, like, someone would come to his cell, which was kind of like isolated from the monastery, because he wanted to kind of be by himself. And people would come and knock on his door, pilgrims, and he would know why they were there. Like as soon as he opened the door, like he would say things to them after opening the door that they themselves, like they had never even met him before, but he knew things about them, and he knew why they were coming to him, and things like of that nature. And, you can't describe those things, those intangible skills, other than being from God. I mean, how else would we attribute those things? He's not a psychic medium or anything like that, but, we attribute that to the Holy Spirit and to guiding him. And, we don't know. It's like a sense of mystery too. None of us have reached, as far as we know, none of us have reached that level of holiness to be able to kind of know all things, or be given this knowledge of other people's emotions and other people's struggles. And, we try, of course, and we have professionals out there who are like trained to kind of read people's, body language and so on and so forth. But this is different. This is not reading physical body language, not reading physical, not listening to someone's words and analyzing them. This is a skill of spiritual analysis, or how I could say it, I guess. It's a sense of being able to know what is happening in someone's soul, without hearing a word out of their mouth or without knowing anything about them. So, glory to God for all things, because that is amazing. And we need those kinds of experiences more widely told about and more widely shared with people, so that they know, that this is truly, like you said, and like Elder Thaddeus says, this is what we should be yearning for. We should be yearning for this return to God, for this relationship with God, and for God to give us these little tastes of holiness and of peace, that we can constantly remember him and go back towards him when we fall away, because we always will fall away, but he's always waiting for us to turn back. So there's that sense of yearning, and I've said this before, like the theme of, a couple Sundays ago is the gospel of Zacchaeus. And, we get closer and closer to Lent. This coming Sunday is the Sunday of the publican and the Pharisee, if you can believe that. but the Sunday of Zacchaeus, and even before that, was a Sunday that I preached, I believe, on the paralytic, I think. That sense of desire to, for them, like Zacchaeus was the desire to meet God. And he did everything in his physical ability to even see Christ in this huge crowd that was around him. And so we have to keep that desire alive so that we can continue getting these little foretastes of, saying it honestly, it's a foretaste of the kingdom, of what the kingdom will be like, having this peace. Because when we're in the kingdom, God willing, one day, that's what it will be like. There will be no turmoil. There will be no wars, no worries at all. The future, the past, the present will all be one, and we'll be in that same place that God is in, where there's no time. So, we have to yearn for that. And there are a lot of people, I would say, a vast majority of people in the world who don't know these kinds of things, don't know these kinds of teachings, don't know that this is reality. And like, this is what we should be thinking about every single day, in every decision that we make, and in every thought that we have. So, as I say that, my iPad just died, even though it's plugged in, which is concerning because now I don't have the book. So, until I can get this sort of charged up again a little bit, I'm going to lean on you a little bit more. So thank you, Catherine. With that, actually, I'll pull it up on my phone as we talk. Is there someone else who wants to share?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Jim.
verse 7. And what I'm wondering is is in chapter chapter, what is it? What do we have? Faith. Chapter 11.
Mm-hmm.
This concept that he talks about in 7, that there will be no sleeping until the second coming of Christ. It's the first time I've heard that or read anything like that. Is that something you discuss at the seminary? Is that a, because he says the soul never sleeps.
Yeah. Well, that's true. I mean, okay. To answer your first question, no, not. I mean, that's not something we discussed at the seminary. I don't think in those terms. But when thinking about it, I think of things like sleep and how, we relate as Orthodox Christians, a lot of our intellectual activity being very closely related with our soul, because, our nous is in our mind. The thing that connects with God is in our mind. And I think of things like dreaming and the things that we kind of do unconsciously or involuntarily, things like our heart beating, our breathing is voluntary and involuntary, obviously, because we can hold our breath or whatever, but mostly it's involuntary. We have to breathe to live. But I think of a lot of the functions that our bodies do. And dreaming is one of them that I think of, is like our body is sleeping, but there again, our soul is active. And how many times, and you can like put your hand up if you want to, but how many times have you had a dream that has been so vivid to you, you felt like you were there? I mean, you felt you were awake. I mean, that's not only physical, that's not only our brains and how amazing our brains are, but that's physical, and it's a spiritual reality that we're partaking in. And dreams are something interesting. I haven't really read anything, if there are any writings about dreams in particular, but I think about it a lot. And dreams are kind of interesting because they can be affected by evil thoughts, by evil, and a lot of what we read in psychology is that many times we have dreams about things that we are thinking about during the day, are stressing about, or whatever the case is. But I think about this as like what I was saying is, our bodies may be actively sleeping, like what he says in number 7, our bodies are unable to follow the soul in this activity and need sleep, right? So our bodies need sleep, but our souls do not. And our souls really are the thing keeping us alive, the thing that has given us life that comes from God. It's like that breath of life from God. And it's the thing that's constantly working within us. But like he says too, during sleep, the body and the soul are separated for a time. And I think about that when I'm thinking about dreams as well, because we wake up from a dream, and we a lot of times, if we remember it, or if it's a nightmare, if we characterize it as a nightmare, we kind of have distress. Like the first thing we feel it in our, kind of maybe in our chest, like you may have we may wake up with a cold sweat or something like that. So it's like, even though our body and our soul are kind of disconnected in this sense during sleep, we come back and our body wakes up, and all of a sudden our body is showing the signs of what our soul has experienced through our dreams. Does that make sense? So like this distress, perhaps. But what he further goes to talk about is, he says, no sleeping until the second coming. It's like no resting. I mean, there's no rest until we are reunited with God, and we are, the second coming also has coupled with it the judgment. And it's like our souls cannot rest until, why do we say when someone dies, may God rest their soul, or, like things like that? Why is our focus on rest? Well, it's like rest is because of the fall, our souls are in constant turmoil, are in constant conflict and chaos, right? Because we're being pulled in this direction by evil and in this direction by whatever else. But we also, our soul itself is constantly yearning for God, because he's our creator. He is the origin of our souls and our bodies, for that matter. But our soul is, like programmed to go back. So we're kind of being pulled in all these different directions in this body that is severely broken and affected by sin and evil and all those things here on earth, all the physical ailments that we have. And so the soul, is constantly in this mode of wanting to return to God. And so when he's saying there's no sleeping until the second coming, I think he really is saying, and when we think about like rest, like we're saying, being with God is rest. I mean, being in the state that we were created to be in, our souls and our bodies, because as we know, our bodies will be reunited with our souls in paradise. Of course, and in a transfigured way, in a changed way. Rest means not having any of the chaos of the fall being involved. And so when we say, in the prayers for a memorial or a funeral, grant rest to your servants, we're asking God to give them that, to reunite with them, of course, to forgive them, and to give them that state of original, as it says in the hymns, original beauty, that original place that we were created as, and that thing that we were created as.
So, Father, we're accountable for our dreams?
What do you mean by accountable?
Well, can we sin in a dream?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. That depends on our definition of sin, I guess. I mean, there's thought involved in our dreams. We can sin in our thoughts. Our thoughts are affected by evil, by the demons, by evil spirits, and so are our dreams. You know, if we confess thoughts we've had, we certainly can confess dreams we've had. I don't know that we could say that we sin in our dreams, but it depends. I don't know. I mean, there are dreams that, here's the thing, perhaps we don't sin in our dreams, but our dreams could definitely affect what we do in real life. You know, we have a dream, a lot of times, you know, my parents will have dreams and they'll be like, you know, I saw my father who passed away several years ago, whatever. I think it's a sign of so-and-so, or, you know, that something bad's going to happen. So it affects their physical reality, because then they're like thinking, oh, you know, something's going to happen in real life, in the physical world, because I saw a vision of, you know, my father or mother, or I you know, I saw this or that. So we interpret, the interpretation of our dreams after we wake up can lead us to sin for sure. Because we also could dream about something and then think that we need to prevent that thing from actually happening in the world, when in reality we could be being deceived by our dreams. And actually, in reality, we probably are being deceived through the avenue of our dreams. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so the devil can affect our dreams.
I would say so. I mean,
I've been reading all these prayers at night.
evil visions are a thing.
Yeah.
And
all
we
these prayers,
pray against them in baptism. You know, we pray that the person who is going to be baptized does not have evil visions and the demons and things like that.
Father, in the chapter before on spiritual struggle, the very last one, number 25, even he talks about dreams. To the spirits,
Oh yeah, right.
The spirits of evil watch closely to see whether we pay attention to our dreams or not. They know what kind of influence dreams have on an individual and what they can do to trigger that influence. If they see that we believe in our dreams and are living in apprehension as to what we will see in our dreams, then they arrange for things from our dreams to happen, so that eventually we lose touch with reality and become incapable of living.
Yeah, there it is. I'm sorry, I forgot about that. Thank you, Catherine. Yeah, so I mean, there it is. You know, we if we pay too much attention to our dreams, we're no longer living in reality. And it's like what I was saying earlier, with this being in this place of God's peace and not worrying about the past or the past or the future or anything like that. If we're constantly worrying about, you know, what we saw in a dream, we're distracted. We're completely distracted from what we should be doing, you know, in prayer and fasting, whatever. It can take up our whole day. You know, we encounter people perhaps in our workplace or friends or whatever, or family, and we're like, oh yeah, I had this terrible dream last night, blah, 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 blah. And then we share it with someone, and then perhaps we're bringing them to be distracted by it too. And then they're like, oh man, oh wow, I'm so sorry, that's terrible. You know, and we sit there and talk about it. And for the last, you know, hour or two that we've talked about it, what have we done? We've completely been distracted from God. And that goes along with everything else. So it's like, you know, we've been set up for, in this book, we've been like set up with, okay, you're up against it in your life, right? Like everything is trying to get you to stay away from God and to stay separated from God. And now in this chapter, we're like, oh, even my dreams are going to keep me away from God too now. So now I have like this extra challenge. So even while I'm sleeping, I have to remember God, and I have to try and wake up from. I know all of us have had terrible nightmares at least once in our life, if not often. Some people have. I think about some people who often have bad dreams, and they are constantly living in this sense of these things. And like what he's alluding to here in number 25 is like that last line. Eventually, we lose touch with reality and become incapable of living. It leads people to mental health breaks. I mean, there are people out there who can't escape these things, and they literally, have to be. Of course, in our society and in our world, we've made it this way. They have to be institutionalized or medicated in some ways, or they're labeled as schizophrenic or things like that. And that's not to say that those things are not real and that we shouldn't recognize those things, because they are. Those are real things. But they're very much, mental illness is very much spiritual. It's not only physical. It's not just the brain as an organ, or whatever, like glands or whatever different hormones are imbalanced. It's also a spiritual ailment. And we had a discussion in seminary once about PTSD and in particular to veterans with PTSD and what they go through on a day-to-day basis, and how that affects them spiritually, and how spiritually the things that perhaps they have seen in warfare, or sometimes even within the ranks of the military, have affected them spiritually, but they don't know about these things. And there's a huge lack of recognition of the help that people with PTSD need. And that's why, and I think that discussion that we had in seminary was back when that movie, American Sniper, came out, about Chris Kyle, because he was tragically killed by a veteran who had PTSD, who he was helping after he went through PTSD and found his way to help people, and kind of found his role after being in the military. And that discussion kind of led to how much of a spiritual ailment that is, and how people like that need guidance and need the church and need support, especially, and how there's a lack of it. And we see it in our country, and how veterans need more of that support. So.
Hey, Father, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. On 11, I believe it's number 1, when he's talking about atheists, he says, I don't know if you still have your book. Oh,
I pulled it up here on my phone.
Okay. Some say there are no atheists.
Mm-hmm.
No, some say they are atheists, but there is no such thing as an atheist. No such thing. Even the devil believes and trembles, but he refuses to do good. There is no such thing as a person who does not believe in God. And there is no rational being on earth that does not long after life with all his heart. What do you think about that? We will give anything to live eternally, and we all long after perfect love. Now, those things are true. So does that mean that there are no atheists? Because I've known people who would really say that they are atheists.
Let me ask you a question. An atheist would say what? I don't believe in God, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they've just recognized God, right, as existing, by saying I don't believe in God. If they didn't believe in God, they wouldn't have to say I don't believe in God, because even by saying his name, they're recognizing him, like being there at all. I guess that wasn't a question that I asked, but I don't know. I don't, I mean, yes, there are atheists, but I mean, it's so difficult, and there have been all, I mean, so people get into such heated debates on this matter. But the fact is that ultimately, yeah, I mean, I feel like we all long for something, and atheism to me is rebellion. It's not so much a lack of belief; it's a rebellion against belief. Like, I don't want to believe, so I'm going to just say that I don't believe in anything. So, those are my 2 cents.
That makes sense. That makes sense. There was one other thing. I'm on digital too, and it's hard for me to get to where I'm going. I think it was 8 about taking communion. Hold on. About who the church lets take communion. Here you go. And it is number 8, 11. I thought that was interesting. The canonical rules written by the Holy Father say about those who are temporarily banned from Holy Communion, murderers, and people who engage in occult practices, such as magic, or to those who frequent so-called psychics and sorcerers, and also women who have had abortions are under penance to abstain until they have repented. I thought those were interesting, sayings too, because I think a lot of times occult, I feel like even within Greek Orthodox, I've heard different people mention sorcery kind of things. I don't think they would think, but even like your horoscope to me is bordering on psychic kind of.
How about yoga?
See, now yoga, I don't see that. I think it can. I think there's all different kinds of yoga now. Some yoga is just like stretching, but some yoga, if you go to some yoga classes, they'll do like alms and stuff like that, and that's Eastern religion. So yeah, I do see that. I mean, you have to, like I said, some things are called yoga that is they're basically just stretch classes, but yeah, there's definitely, I think, an element of Eastern religion that it's bordering on, occult type practices.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you said it. I think you said it pretty correctly. Yeah, I mean, I don't know a lot about yoga. I brought it up because it always comes up. It always comes up in this conversation. in this conversation, but with the canons, a lot of times if we read the canons without context, they can seem harsh. Many times, I would say, and when you read some of these things, you're like, where's the mercy there? Where's God's mercy for someone who, for example, had an abortion? And a lot of the times the canons are like our baseline, because our situations are all different. And I'm not condoning any of these things by saying this, but I'm saying the canons are our baseline, and from there, based on the person, it's up to the spiritual father or the bishop. Ultimately, actually, the bishop is the one who is charged with enforcing the canons in the situation. So we, as the presbyters in the parishes and things like that, if we have a situation that comes to something canonical like that, something extreme, I would say, it's our responsibility to go to our hierarch first, because ultimately we are in the parishes as presbyters because the hierarch cannot be in 50 different places at one time and administer to 50 different places. So we're given the blessing by him. And when we encounter situations like this, he's the first person we go to, because he is charged in his role as the bishop to follow the canons to the best of his ability, but also he's a pastor, just as we are, and he discerns when mercy is, or when not mercy, when what's called economia is given, when some leniency is given, or when things need to be stern. So again, it's situation to situation. It's not like, if you have had an abortion, you are, I hate using that. I shouldn't use that one. What are one of the other ones?
Like
someone. Yeah, I mean, things.
I mean, Elder was saying they're a woman who has an abortion until she repents.
Right.
So
Right.
just to emphasize that. So I think, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that's the importance of confession, which I was raised my whole life Orthodox and never had confession until I moved here. Go figure.
But notice what he says at the end of that paragraph too. If we want eternal life with him, with God, then we have to forgive everyone from the heart. And he had in the sentences before that were listing all of those things. We have to also have forgiveness. Because all of these things, one of the things he mentions there is murder, right? Well, one of our prime examples in the church is Saint Geonisios. And if you don't know his story, Saint Geonisios was a priest. I think he was a bishop too. But his brother was murdered. And one day, a man came to his church, and he said, "Please, Geonisios, or Father Geonisios, I'm hiding from the police. I need to give confession." And so he sits down with him and gives his confession, and his confession is, "I murdered someone, and I'm hiding because they're coming after me." And it turned out that the person that he murdered was Saint Geonisios' brother. And what do you think Saint Geonisios did when he finished confessing? He forgave him. And when the police came searching for him, I don't know if he hid the man, he let him go, something like that. But ultimately, the moral is that he forgave the man who murdered his brother. And so even some of the most heinous things still require our forgiveness. A lot of times we say, well, I forgive, but I won't forget. But that's not right. If we truly are forgiving the way that God forgives us, we forgive, and that is it. There's no remembering these things. There's no holding a grudge afterwards, holding it over someone, because then who's the one sinning? We are. We're doing evil to this person who, whatever the situation is. But if they ask for forgiveness and we forgive them, that should be it. That's it. That's the end of the discussion. And that's how it is with God. I mean, if we truly are penitent and go to confession and ask for his forgiveness and get his forgiveness, that's it. We don't hear from God like, yeah, I forgive you for not fasting this week. And then the next day he's like, hey, you didn't fast yesterday. I remember that, by the way. No. Well, we don't, that's how we should be too. We shouldn't bring up these things again. We do. I'm not saying we don't. Ultimately we do sometimes, but that's not what we're called to do in forgiveness. And that's what he means here by saying forgiving everyone from the heart. Because once we forgive someone from the depths of our heart, we don't need to think about what they've done to us anymore. As hard as it can be, because there are some things out there that are like, those are the situations where we say, well, I forgive you, but I'm not going to ever forget this. I can't believe you did this to me. I'll never forget this, but I forgive you. That's not really real forgiveness. I'm sorry if that offends anyone, but the truth hurts.
We forgive
Does
you.
anyone-
Father.
Oh, good. Thank you. Please forget also.
We'll see.
Forgotten.
Oh man. Okay. Well, it's not my, I mean, it's not my truth. It's not something I'm making up anyway, but I have to follow that too. I have to forget things when people do them to me. Like like Dimitri and Susan, we had a discussion about driving. Remember when I came to your house last week to bless your house? And forgiveness and forgetting are the hardest thing on the road for me, because the guy that cut me off, I'm not going to forget that. And when I see you down the road, maybe I'll do the same thing to you. It's terrible. I shouldn't do that way. But once in a while, I do
Road
that
rage.
thing. I do that thing. It's not really rage. It's more like just not forgetting.
But Father, I mean, along those same lines, it feels like, yes, we are to forgive and forget. But in that same example, if somebody cuts me off, I may forgive them and forget it, but I'm not going to put myself in a situation where they're going to cut me off again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think as humans, sometimes sometimes I muddle into this, well, I forgive you, and I try and forget, and then I find myself in the same situation where somebody is harming and hurting me again, right? So
That's true. Yeah.
there needs to be some lesson learned there, I feel, as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. There definitely, the word forget is kind of different. It's like it should change to like, forgive and I don't know, don't be hurt by this again. But we should be mindful of the thing that we're forgiving, because that could also be our neighbor's struggle. That could be our neighbor's spiritual struggle, that we need to pray for them for that. And so, to pray for them for what they're struggling with, yeah, we do need to remember what that is. But remember it in the right way. Remember it in your prayers and ask God to help the person, instead of saying, I'll never forget this, or I'll never, a lot of what goes with that is trust. And it's like, I forgive you, but now I don't trust you anymore. And that's what we mean by when we say, I won't forget, like I'll never trust you again with X, Y, and Z because you did this, but I forgive you, like we're fine. But, so we have to remember that. We have to remember to give it to God and let God kind of sanctify that.
And to pray for that person who has hurt you and wronged you. I have a very short story. When I first moved here 20 years ago, at school, it was a whole different way of education down here from where I came from in New York. And there was a principal assistant who made mincemeat out of me, and it was awful. And I was actually working part-time in the school. Long story short, I was respectful. She had me in tears. I prayed. I just prayed for her. I said, I hope she sees what she did. I mean, here I'm a newcomer, my poor daughter. It was awful. Do you know what? 6 months later, she came to me and apologized. And then she helped me get a full-time teaching job.
Wow. See?
So that every time I get mad and hold a grudge and don't forget, I try to remember that. It was powerful.
Yeah. That's the power of prayer. Truly. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think just to the point of our book, right? It all starts in our thoughts, right? So like you had that thought first, like I should pray for her. And I don't know, it seems like this is kind of what Elder Thaddeus is getting at, is like that battlefield begins in our mind. And once we take that self-control there, we change how we're going to think about this person and the situation that has hurt you, then we're able to take that next step, which is praying for them.
Right.
And it really, and I think he says it determines our lives, right? Like that's your thoughts determining your life, and the prayer being the fruit of your thought that you had for your principle.
Very true.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, it's interesting. Presbytera and I have been since the end of October, have been in this program for kind of eating healthier and trying to lose some weight and things like that. And there are these it's an app that we use. There are these lessons that we go through every day as we progress. And one of the first lessons you learn about this is in regards to food, but I promise there's a point. Is this idea of what they call in this app thought distortions, which I thought was interesting. And when it's talking about thought distortions in regards to food, in regards to food and in regards to getting healthier, things like that, it's like thought distortions are things like, I'll never be able to do this. I'll never be able to keep this up. I'll never be able to whatever, X, Y, Z. And I think it's interesting to the point of our book because those thought distortions happen to us daily. But beyond just food and things like that, they happen to us in everything sometimes. And we call it like our self-esteem, we call it, different things. But we constantly have thoughts that are like, I can't do this. I'll never be able to do this. I'll never be able to pray, unceasingly, whatever. I'll never be able to, progress in my spiritual life. I'll never be able to get this job. And a lot of those things that through this book, we've learned that those things are trying to affect us from the outside, those thoughts. But if we foster our thoughts in prayer and in a godly manner, then we change both ourselves first, and then we affect those around us. And so, very much so, this book has helped us, even while we're going through this program, kind of change what our lives are like in our house. And hopefully, those things lead to our thoughts changing, things within, our church, within Presbytera's workplace, throughout the world, if we can. But it's always a challenge. And so we always have these underlying and these external things that are trying to affect us. So I thought that was interesting, and I wanted to bring that up because I made that idea of distorted thoughts is like what Elder Thaddeus talks about. We're constantly being affected by evil spirits. You know what I mean? And so it was interesting that came up in our program here too. So it's I know we started around 7:45. It's 7:40 now. If we want to bring up maybe a final thought to talk about, if anyone has one. If not, we can wrap up too and go in peace. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to bring up? I know we didn't go over a lot, but I think we had nice conversations about what we did go over. Dimitri?
What are we covering next week? What chapter?
Next week, let me go over to next week will be 23rd. Should be 13 and 14, right? Do I have that right? Hold on.
Because 13 is pretty short.
13, let me just check here. 13. Yeah, 13 and 14. And then on Tuesday, March 2nd, we'll be doing chapter 15. And that should finish us out. That sound good? Does that sound correct to everybody? I want to make sure I'm correct. Okay. All right, good. If there's nothing else anyone wants to ask about or talk about, I pray that we all have a blessed rest of our evening, and everybody stay safe out there. Luckily, we saw some sunshine today, because it felt like weeks without sunshine. It was a nice day today. It was nice to be out and about and be running around. But anyways, God bless all of you. I look forward to seeing you next week or over the weekend or throughout the week, wherever. Like I said, be safe and God bless all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Father. Good night,
Bless you
Father.
too.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Bye, everybody.